me caption this and then share the screen. Okay, so for this class, let me switch to 27A real quick. You do have this one last chapter to cover. We are going to talk a little bit about court procedures for computer forensic this week. And then you do have a quiz that's open. So that's going to cover chapter 6 through 10. And then make sure if you want to review for the quiz, you can go back to your homework from the prior week. If you haven't done that, make sure that you turn that in. And then you can do the extra credit quiz for extra points. And if you have the highest score, you can get a gift card. So today we're going to talk about one chapter. What I plan to do next week is we are going to do maybe a couple of labs, one per day. Hi. I am going to address a little bit more on forensic, but I wanted to teach you how to use Security Onion, which is a different Linux release that has different tools. So that way you know how to use the forensic. So that's my plan for Monday. And then on Wednesday, we're going to do one more lab that's going to use a similar tool. So we're going to analyze a little bit on the web or on the network traffic. We're going to expand a little bit more on how to dig into things so you get a little bit more hands-on. Then in the following week, I'm going to do the final review. I want to say right before Thanksgiving. And then you're going to have Thanksgiving. Then you might not have to come to class for week, I want to say 13, 14, and 15. But if you want to come to class to work on your project, you're welcome to do that. I'll be here. So if you want to meet here or if you want to meet outside with your classmates, that's totally fine with me. And then your final exam will be open during the second week of December. If you want to come to class to take the test because there's internet and a quiet space, that's fine too. Okay. You don't have to come after week from. So the last week is week 16, and the last week that you need to come is, I want to say, week 13. So we're in week 11 now. So 2 weeks from now. Yeah. I'll let you know if we can wrap up some of the review content. So if it is all in one shot, then you know, I will put the recording and stuff online, however, after that. So I have another lab that I'm going to add the module for week 12. I'm going to add here. And then week 13, we're going to do final review. And then after that, 14 and 15. 14, 15, and 16. Yeah.
Is this right now 40?
40 has a little bit more content. I know I make you guys come more for 40, but at least you can leave early.
Today 40 was chill.
Yeah. So we are coming close to the end. So yeah, 40, we might be able to have 1 or 2 weeks off. And then work on things, but I have to see the schedule because we're still trying to catch up with some hands-on stuff. All right, so let's talk about this week assignment and notes. So like always, your chapters is fairly short for this class. This one, it's gonna go through the witness and the court procedures. So for your proceedings and different things that you would need for the legal side. Okay, so in chapter 11, which is the last chapter in the textbook, it goes through the process and how you would need to present your report, because last week we talked about how our report is important. So we're going to touch on that in our project. All right, so for the proceeding, sometimes you would have to go in front of the grand jury. And these are going to be the people who've been selected, right? They're citizens to be able to do some kind of panel analysis to determine if someone is guilty or not. Okay, so the grand jury, it has the power to subpoena some of the information, including your testimony. So if you are a forensic specialist, or if you work for law enforcement in this particular area for computing, you will probably have to provide evidence, sometimes physical evidence to the grand jury. Then you have arraignment, which is a formal reading of your criminal complaint. So the accused would then present the charged information, and that could be in many different areas, fraudulent, could be cyberbullying. There could be so many things that would involve us in the forensic. So this is the hearing where the accused would present their case, and then they would have their plea. Okay, whether it's guilty or not guilty. Then after that, there will be a detention hearing. And this is the next step in that the judge will determine if the accused should be detained or released. So in the criminal area, what you would see is this is when people would either get sent to sentence for a certain amount of time. So the judge will be able to have that determination at the end. Okay. Then you have evidentiary hearing. So that's the next one. And this could be related to, a lot of the times this is related to the criminal cases where there's not exclude or the limit of evidence is offered. So you might have to present evidence in this case, right? Hence the name. Okay, so the evidence can potentially impact the case, and that needs to be presented to both sides. So you would have the attorneys there present on both sides to acknowledge that those are evidence for the court cases. And then the trial can be long or short. It really depends on the type of the case. So if it is criminal or civil, you have to present it to the jury or the judge. And sometimes, most of the time, we're called to testify. So in the case that will be presented, and the attorneys, they actually meet with the witnesses or anyone that's testifying in the case prior. So that is also set up with appointments with the attorney before you go to trial. And then the deposition, this is going to be your sworn testimony. So that's confined to the court, and commonly that will be for civil cases. But so the judge, the attorneys, and the witness must be present. And so this is a little bit different than your normal court trial based type of meetings. So in this step, we are gonna talk about, so in their assignment, you are gonna answer some of the questions, and we're gonna talk about some procedures and different things that we need. So for number one, it says, ask a forensic investigator, when do you testify during the court proceedings? So if you're looking at all the bullet points that we just went through, right, you would need to testify either with the grand jury when you are subpoenaed, in evidentiary hearing. So you need to provide your testimony, especially if you're doing an analysis on that for a certain individual on that case, or on an individual in that case. When it goes to trial, and that could extend over months or years. And then also in deposition. And so those bullet points tell you what each of these really consists of, right, in general. So summarize some of the procedures that will require in these areas. And we want to bring in the neutral perspective, even when in the case where we have artifacts, right? So you would present your artifacts, and you would validate your artifacts during your testimony. Hello. Okay, so those are the things. And then for question 2, it says, what is the role of the digital investigator in the criminal or the civil jurisdiction processes? So your role mostly is going to be testify after you have your finding in your report as an expert witness or a witness. Okay. So in the case where if we can specialize in a certain area, even though we can be all digital investigator, right? But for some people, they would specialize in, so that would be an expert area. And then, or it will just be a regular witness. So you are called to court to testify as a witness. Okay. And so your reports plays an important role. So that brings us to number 3. What is the difference between the expert witness and a regular witness when you testify in court? Your expert witness can offer an opinion after stating the facts. Okay. Whereas a regular witness can only offer evidence and factual account. So when you're brought to court, when you're subpoenaed to court, right? If you're fall under the expert witness, you would be able to give your recommendation and your opinion after you state your evidence or your artifacts. Whereas a regular witness, you can only provide what you found. Okay. So that's the key. So make sure we know these for our final exam. As you know, that the ending chapters will show up on the final and not the quiz. Yeah.
For the final exam, is it covering the notes that we take, or does it include one?
There might be a few questions that are lab related, but mostly like your,
The notes?
yeah, notes. And also technology that's brought up in the notes, but I try to have the lab that reflects what we learn with the notes, right? Okay. Any other questions? Exam is multiple choice, like the quiz, just longer. Okay, so that's the first part. On the same page, right, it goes through the roles. And so when you go through here, it talks about who's the judge, the court reporter, the clerk, bailiff. And then, you know, we fall into this category, which is your witness. And that will be just the individual that have the knowledge of the incident in the question, the incident is in question, and can present the evidence of the matter. And in some cases, they would bring forth, you know, so they might go to you as a digital forensic and you know, specialist, and they also might go to others, so that way they can compare the result as well. Okay. So here it goes through and it talks about the hearing, how it's held, and the judge decides whether it is probable cause to move forward with the trial. So the preliminary hearing is when the attorney met with the judge and the accused, right? And then they would determine if that can proceed to a trial. And if it is a larger trial, that can go to the grand jury. And that will be determining for the indictment and so on. I'm sure you've seen shows and movies that depicts this, right? And the process in itself, and sometimes even computer forensic area. And then, so as far as you being a witness, you might be cross-examined by the attorneys from both sides, right? They will question you, and sometimes that they might question in detail, so that way they want to make sure that you are clear, or use that to prove their claim. Okay, so the areas for the witnesses for that question, you can find it on page 2. Okay, so the things that I want to highlight here is in bold. It says, no matter which side that you're on, you need to start communicating with the attorney at the very beginning, right? They will reach out to you, and you also need to in communication with them. You need to ask about how can you have a successful outcome. You want to learn about the potential participants in the case, and also suspects, witness, victims, etc. Anybody that's affiliated with the case. In this case, sometimes it could be family members, or, you know, roommates, friends, things like that. And then you need to make sure that you identify the points that can dispute in the proceeding. And and the opposition of the expert witness or their prior testimony. So sometimes that they can present something that's found previously, and then you are following up with that finding. So you need to look at what would be the prior testimony. And all of that can be recorded through the court trial information. Okay, so for 4, it says, what can you do to prepare your testimony as a witness or an expert witness? We talked about how we should communicate with the attorney very earlier on to look at the requirements for successful outcome. And then to be able to learn everything about the affiliates in that case, participants, suspect, victims, and the attorneys of the proceedings. Then we want to be educated about the points of dispute of the proceeding. What could they counter argue, or what kind of challenges that you might be expecting in testifying in court? So we want to research the opposition expert witness, because they would bring expert witness that will oppose to what you can provide and their prior testimony. And with that, I think going through the procedures like this, you would see that you would build the experience with knowing the type of people that you work with, or the type of attorneys that you need to be able to communicate with, and so on. Any questions? So for the preparation, what we want to do is we want to kind of have a list of the questions. So what kind of theory, what is the theory of the case, right? And that was what we started with when we're trying to find our artifacts. And does this theory fit within the facts that's for the case? And when you have a hypothesis for your case, right? We always have a main hypothesis, and we would have an alternate hypothesis. So we can say that, you know, this fraudulent case was committed by so-and-so, right? And so on, right? Or it could not be committed by so-and-so. That will be an alternate hypothesis for the case. And so we would then have the facts to really provide our support for our proof. Okay. And is it going to be centralized to the testimony? So are you going to present mostly in the facts in your testimony? And what facts can confirm or cannot confirm? So this is where your validity comes in, right? If we test it a few times and the outcome is the same, using different type of tools, and we can confirm. But if something that you cannot confirm, if you make an assumption, you cannot confirm that. Okay, so you got to be careful with that, the gray area. Okay. All right, so here are the things that you should do. You should review your report and take notes. So we talked about how when we go through and when you do your project, make sure you take notes, as it would help you with the report. So go through your notes and your report, and before you take the stand or testify, you will be prepared by going through it, right? It's like studying for your lesson before the test. Practice answering your questions, because a lot of times the attorney will provide you with the type of questions that they're going to ask, right? At least the side that you're on. The key preparation phrases and working with the attorney on both sides, so that way you would have a clear understanding of how to state the evidence or how you interpret the evidence. Okay. And then before you can be appointed as an expert witness, in the matter, you have to have the approval of the judge. And then you would go through the review process. So that means that you have to submit your resume or your work experience information in this area, and that gives you, right, acknowledgement in your expertise in this area. So with that, what we can say is that we need to state the questions, right, that you can find on page 2. What is the theory of the case? Does my theory fit the facts in the case? What facts is central to my testimony? And what facts can I confirm or cannot confirm? Then for 6, why is CV? And that's similar to your resume. CV is just more extended, right? So it will go more in depth with the detail in the work experience. Why is it needed for the expert witness? It's because CV highlights the professional experience and the educational information, which is used by the attorney in the reviewing process for the expert witness. So that makes you an expert in the area if you have extensive experience and knowledge, right? Training. So if you have certification, if you have education background in this area, if you have, let's say, a few, 5-10 years experience in forensic analysis, then that makes you an expert witness compared to a regular witness. So when they look at the CV, and if the experience is not long, right? And it's pretty standard, so that way that person would just become a witness and provide the testimony as a witness. So very similar to a resume when you write your CV. The components are, you're gonna have your name, your title, your contact information at the top. And then you would state the field of expertise in the body. So you would say specialize in or specialization areas, and you would list them. So let's say that if you are specialized in file carving, you would list that for forensic, right? Or if you specialize, and you can also list the software tools that you use, right? Your experience or your credential, your certifications. So in that, we would have to identify the areas of the field that would be useful. And in cybersecurity, the niche, right? You can be an expert in one area or maybe a few areas, and then, your experience might encompass others, but you want to highlight the areas that you are best in. And then a quick run. So a synopsis in your career education experience, very similar to a resume. You would give like your timeline in your work experience or your career, and then your education background. So like your degrees, your certifications. And I would suggest keep it like the resume. You would list as bullets. Or if you use paragraph, just keep it as a short paragraph. And any kind of publications, because people who are scientifically published in peer-reviewed journals are highly recognized, not just in academia, but in the scientific world. Or if you have been recognized in organizations or institutions, the type of awards that you use. Or licensing. Our area is really certification. So for example, if you're certified in NCASE or FTK, like certain type of products, that makes you, more of an expert compared to other people. Licensing. So in some role that requires you to pass state licensing or federal licensing, etc. I would recommend listing professional membership. And for us, that's really important. Some of that comes with certification. Some of it is, you enroll. So for example, like IEEE, for the student membership is like $50 a year. And you get access to journals and things that's done by IEEE. Or if if you're part of like certain type of association that's related to cybersecurity, like for me, I'm in Women in Cybersecurity, right? I paid a membership fee and I participated in their events. Or, if you're in ISACA, there's so many different things that you can join. So we do have some grants that allows us to be able to support that through the cybersecurity program, if you're an MVC student. So I will share with the student body more of what type of membership that you can get, but this is always helpful for jobs and, other things like this. And then any kind of cases, testimony in the previous cases, so you want to be able to kind of give a quick summary with that. Okay. Now, when you compare the CV to the resume, CVs just have more pages because this is a little bit more detail-oriented. Format's a little different. In academia, if you look at a lot of the professors, all of us, we use CVs. We hardly ever use resume because it's too brief, right? CVs really allows us to highlight the topics that we teach. So when you apply to teach or you apply to certain area that requires only CV, right, you want to be a little bit more thorough in your expertise or your knowledge in a certain area. Any question? Okay. So here it tells you all the specific details in the CV, formal education like degree certificates, employment history, publications, awards, etc. And so for the process to become a witness expert is that you would either be requested, right? Or if you want to volunteer, you would have to submit your CV to the attorneys and the team that's evaluating for the process with the court. Then the bailiff will swear you in under oath. Now, you don't have to be a sworn officer to be a forensic person, even if you work for law enforcement, right? Some institution require that. Like, for example, if you work for NSA, FBI, CIA, in some role in computer forensic, you do have to go through their training and you would be in, their organization as sworn officer or sometimes not, right? So in this case, once the bailiff sworn you in, then the attorneys, they would ask you questions. Okay. And then the judge will ask you questions. So here it walks you through the details or the guidelines on how to provide testimony of your artifacts. So how would you provide your testimony in a trial as an expert witness? So as an expert witness, you can provide your opinions and your recommendation from the factual findings. So provide expert opinions based on factual findings. You need to explain the technical details in the most simple term because we can't assume that they would know all our technical terms. You need to speak slowly. So that way, and this is a tendency with a lot of tech professional. I'm not generalizing, but from my work experience, when I work with people in cybersecurity or people in the IT field, I feel like a lot of their specialists and their professionals speak very fast because we are normally operating at a faster pace. So we communicate in a faster pace, right? Or sometimes we're overexcited about things and we might, or sometimes you're nervous and so your speech pattern tends to accelerate. So make sure that we communicate well, and you should practice before you go. We talked about that in the prior. You should add examples. And think of this as also a way that you should communicate in your interviews. So in your testimony, basically, it's an interview in the court, right? A you know, what kind of work you've done on that case and so on. So for whenever, you know, when you ask of something, try to provide analogies or example. So that way you can communicate the complex details across well. My biggest thing about when I interview people for tech jobs is that they give me a 1-sentence answer, right? Like I would ask, what makes you be suitable for this job? And then they would be like, oh, because I love it. That's not a good enough answer. Or sometimes when we ask like, you know, something that comes up yes or no, you need to expand on it, right? So make sure you provide analogies and example. That's always good for interviews as well. Yeah, question? So when they ask you like questions that for like yes or no, like do you have knowledge of, let's say, I like to ask technical questions sometime when I interview, like, do you have knowledge of VMware, VirtualBox or whatever? And people would say, yes, I've worked with it in my prior job before, and then they stop there, right? Like, so I'm looking for something like, I've used it on this at this time, you know, for how long, and I've used it to configure this. That's what I'm looking for. So whenever they ask that, they're always going to look for your expansion, or sometimes you have to expand on the example, right? So make sure, but don't go more than 5 minutes. Anytime that over 3 minutes is too long, because you tend to ramble on and then you catch yourself making mistakes, right? So for me, like for my own practice, I always try to keep my answer within 3 minutes. And that's good enough, because when it's too long, people tend to lose their attention to your answer. All right. How can you ensure your integrity in your evidence? We want to make sure that we looked at NIST guidelines. We talked about looking at NIST guidelines. Your guidelines that are available in the industry. Also, state regulations and federal regulations are always important. How to preserve your evidence, especially digital evidence. California has specific requirement on the retention of data, and after you have gather it, you know, you have to ensure that it's secure, and there's integrity that's involved. And we talked about how we can use hash to make sure that things are not changed. And then also your best practices. What is the industry recommend? Okay. So we can use encryption to secure a lot of things, but we can also use other technology to make sure that we can show the court that since, you know, this is found, it's not been jeopardized or modified. Evidence must be reliable and credible, and it needs to be relevant to facts. So when you did your email and when we did the Google Pixel lab, right, you saw that we found a bunch of stuff. Right? We didn't really state the case on what we're finding, but when you're doing your project, you would have objectives. Okay. This is what you need to find. Okay. So if you have the case, you want to build your evidence around that case, to build out the profile of that individual. Okay. So the materials on an issue that is being questioned. So whenever you do analysis on anything, it is a research. So you always want to start with at least 3 questions. Okay. From my experience, I always ask myself, what am I trying to find? Even when you do ethical hacking, what are you trying to find? Right? Where am I finding it from? Okay. And then what are some of the extended area that I need to look into? So you want to state the questions so that way you can build off of those questions. And in cybersecurity, we know that sometimes, right, it leads us down one road, and then that's not exactly what you need, and then you have to start all over again. And that happens a lot. So if you're clear with your objective, you have an idea of what you need to find, because sometimes it's not clear, right? They give you a smartphone and they said, find something that relates to this person. So you're gonna start with, okay, maybe I should find images, I should find email, I should find chat conversation, I should find files that would relate to this file, right? So you would start with some questions that you want to state to be able to build out your evidence. What is considered to be ethical practice? We need to make sure that it is ethical, and in this field is so important. There is always that gray line, that thin line that's gonna separate between ethical and unethical, and it's common in cybersecurity. So, and a lot of the moral principle is really based on the individual, I think. Your upbringing, your culture, your perspective on society, right? But what is considered to be moral principle, but it's really what is governed by regulation and society. Okay. So the behavior of the individual and the activity is really controlled by the rules, right? Where everybody follows. But I think when we state the moral principles, your principles can be a little different than my principle, I think, because it could just be that, you know, our upbringing, our culture, and in some cases, you know, if they're from different part of the world, that's different than what you see, and also the laws are different. So when you're looking at like European country on how they look at things and how they regulate things is a little bit different than North America or United States. Okay. So in this next part, it talks about the guidelines to consider, right? Don't joke around, don't argue with the attorneys, speak clearly, listen to the entire question. So be patient and wait for the questions. Make sure that we are unbiased. And then make sure that we provide integrity. Make sure that your evidence must be authenticated. And then if you're bringing images, right? Sometimes you can use a third party, right? To validate the photo that's taken and so on. Now, be careful with photo is when, you know, if you are taking the photo, the device that you're using to take the photo, do not mix your personal device with security professional device. This is an area that I highly recommend that you look into, because when you get hired to do the work, like keep your system separate from your personal system, because when things get mixed in, not only that you're jeopardizing your own data, your own personal data, but a lot of the time it's questionable, especially with forensic. So if they don't provide you with the system to use, you should use if you're using your own system, do not keep personal data on there, because that might come off, you know, questionable in court and other things. So. Okay, and then it talks about evidence can be fragile. Now, if you're collecting volatile data, that's we touch on RAM a little bit, right? Where we use RAM. So because things can change based on your system state. And so you need to state what could alter the evidence. So that way they would look at those parameters and see that that would be the potential impact. So we should acknowledge that, and we should show that to the court. Okay, and then it goes into ethics and behavior. So here what I did was I put down some of the recommended like code of ethics. So when you go through the certification for this area, they actually focus a lot on this. Okay, so if you are preparing for certification, I recommend that you look through professional code of ethics. So it goes and it lists some of the details, and I provided some links for you there. Okay, then if you go for the international one, right, refer to the International Society of Forensic Computer Examiners. They give you guidance and code of ethics there. Pretty close, I think, in general, but there's extension for the international. And then there's Certified Computer Examiner, your CCE. So, all right. So for number 11, it says, what resources can provide the code of ethics for the computer forensic investigation? I would refer to the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. I think it's a broader one that covers more. And then, but again, you can go to different society for forensic, and association and organization. They all pretty much have the code of ethics stated somewhere on their site. And then the International Society of Forensic Computer Examiners, your ISFCE. And the links are provided on your notes, or of course, you can always use your search engine to find these. Now, certifications can be in different ranges, so it really depends on the level where you want to operate. I think we touched on that at the beginning. And also certain area, so sometimes it could be to a certain product. Okay. But industry certification for cybersecurity is a way that the industry can verify that you qualify to do something, meaning that you have the knowledge and the skills to be able to perform something, right? You don't want someone to cut your hair, or even the nurses, right? That's not qualified to be able to assist you. So similar to that, we don't have a standardized way to perform this in the state or the federal level. So we would do it as an industry. So when you do professional certification, all that does is it validate to the industry that you are capable to perform a certain skill and have a certain knowledge for that particular area. Like ethical hacking, pen testing, right? Networking, securing system. And it requires you to use the updated skill, and this is why they make you recertify or train. So update the skills and knowledge with the changes and the regulation in technology. So sometimes technology change, sometimes rules or laws change. So this is why 3 years is the limit. And then it also, we would maintain practices within the ethical principles in the field. So a lot of times certification address, right, ethical principles and practices. Any question? Now, if you are interested in the practice test for the CFT-A, which is the Computer Forensic Technology Associates, I do have practice test access through one of Pearson's product. So if you do take the practice test, you might be able to, the whole point in this class is to kind of give you the overview of how to be an associates in computer forensic. And if you like this, if you want to do this, you should pursue certification. It is harder to obtain experience or even work in this area because it's like a special niche. But once you have the experience and work in this area, you are highly demanded. You can also be an incident response specialist. It doesn't have to be specifically forensic because, sometimes people find this kind of dull because it might take a lot of time and it's not all that interesting, but some people find it very interesting. I've had students that going into this class wanting to do this, and then after they found out that they have to do all of these things for forensic, they're like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to do ethical hacking. And so, and then sometime when you do ethical hacking, you might need some knowledge in this area. So it's always good to have forensic knowledge in cybersecurity because, it's a reactive component of cybersecurity. You go in and look at what had happened, not while it's happened or before it happened, right? Questions? Okay, so for industry certification information is here. Now, some certification requires you to have multiple years experience, like at least 3 years experience, even as an intern to start, right? Now, how do they validate your experience? It's through letter of recommendation or letter of reference. So for example, when I applied to sit for the CISSP certification, it requires 7 years in security. So, and you have to provide 2 or more references that can validate your 7 years of experience. So your prior director, so do not burn bridges because those people are valuable in your certification area. Like, especially when you go for the bigger fish, right? Like CISSP costs more, but a lot of the people go for it because they want to be CIO or CISO, right? CISO for the cybersecurity one. For when you work for a very large enterprise, their salary can go from above $200,000 to $400,000 easily. But a lot of the times you're gonna hit at least 150 and more. So when you're looking at like City of Riverside CIO, or some of the CIO in the local area, they make quite a bit of money. So what you see is, sometimes you would have to fulfill a certain requirement in order to obtain the certification. So a big one that you see out there for this field, for this forensic area, is NCASE is big, FTK is big. That because in the law enforcement people use it. So if you look at EC Console, I think they discontinue one of the certification. I know the ethical hacking is their
Hacking friends.
yeah. So the CEH is through them. That's their moneymaker, really, in my opinion. So I have the practice test for EC Console, not the test, but the practice test. And that's good. If you go through it, it's always good to put that on the resume. So for those of you who are studying for the CEH, right, this is, and they always raise up the price because people demands it. So when you look at now, they're offering classes and I think they use, they use Cyber Range. I talked to Cyber Range a while back, as far as labs. Let me see for the CFT. It's always like a challenge to find their certification because they always have it buried, I think. Let's see. I think I did post it in your, yeah. But that's different though. The CHFI, they used to have the CFT. Yeah, so this now is the hacking forensic. So it requires a little bit of the tools with the ethical hacking. I wonder if I can see if they still support. Hold on one second. I'm interested in CFT. Oh, no. So it is a CCT now. So now I think it's under the umbrella of the cybersecurity technician. So they redesigned this. Yeah, so it's to capture the flag. Okay, so if you're interested in doing some of the practice tests, I know Joseph emailed me about that. So on in the first module, I did post a page where you can find some certifications. GIAC is a big one in this area. So if you want to work for law enforcement, this is really the area that you can expand on. And then there are some online free training for different areas with GIAC. So if you look, right, knowing how to do registry forensic, we touch on this, email forensic, log analysis, USB, and so on. Okay. The questions, 115 questions, 3 hours, and you can pass it with a 71% or higher. I knew a couple people that passed these tests, and it seems like, I don't want to generalize, but their skills are okay, you know? So I don't think it's a difficult test. I don't think any test is difficult if you put in the time to train yourself and kind of familiarize. So it talks about exam format. So you can go and check out, you know, the objectives and things like that. So you can study. And of course, there's tons of books and materials and even free ones online that you can find. Okay. And we touch a lot of this in this class. So if you do certify for a certain area, I recommend that you do it within the 6 months after you finish the class. Otherwise, you're going to forget. Most of my students successfully pass certification that way, right? Like if they study CIS25, 6 months after, within the 6 months, they sit for the test. So I do have voucher for the CompTIA ones. I don't have the voucher for the EC Console one because they are a little bit higher in price. I did put it on some of the grants, so I don't know if I can use it. So sometime next week I can meet with the dean and talk about how we're going to be able to expense out some of the money. Okay. Any questions?
You teach 27B?
I have it here in this school. I've taught it at other institutions. I will likely teach it later on. I know Mr. Barry does it at RCC. He previously was certified in CEH. So I went for the higher ones in cybersecurity and then Microsoft. So, but I might, likely I will teach it next time after A. We haven't really offered, I think we did once and it was online with Anderson. Okay, so I think that wraps up all the questions. Any question regarding the assignment before we move into the project? Project's actually really easy. Yeah, so I'll do, and if I teach ethical hacking, it will be like, you know, you will use Kali Linux, you will use the tools, just like how you use a cloud lab, but more like, you know, we would do it with the virtual machine or install the tools. So I will look through the tools and make them install it on these machines instead of like using the virtual machine that has Windows 10 because it's kind of slow. Okay, so let's talk about the project. Anybody looked at it already?
Yeah.
It's really easy. So I decided that I kept most of the same content because I was digging around and trying to get image and all of these things. I had a hard time finding images for like PCAP with the same theme and the same case, unless it's like abundantly available. But this one is also available. I encourage you to go through and find, even if you don't find all the rhinos, it's fine, you know. But the whole point is the learning process behind this, to apply the concept that you learn in this class. Okay, so when you look through, I provided you with log files and DD. Okay, and then basically you use these to be able to find 9 rhino pictures. Okay, so you're gonna do a rhino hunt, and in that I'm gonna expect you to write a report on where you found the picture, what kind of picture it is, how you found the picture. So treat it like if this was to go to court, you have to be very clear and concise. Okay, but your objective is you need to find at least 9. There are people that found more. There should be more. Okay, And as you go through, make sure we take notes and take screen captures. So I'm gonna look for at least 9 rhinos, and that's 40 points. If you found less, you just take a little bit of a hit on the points, that's all. Okay. You are going to look at network traffic. So we talked about using one of the tools earlier on, right, in the first lab. I am going to present to you some new tools in the upcoming lab next week, where you are going to use Security Onion and also Wireshark to be able to analyze PCAP files for either malware or some kind of incident. So your answer to these questions are going to be important. This is your objective. Who gave the accused the Telnet or FTP account? You need to find out who that is. What is the username and the password of the account? Okay. What relevant file transfer appears in the network traces? So what kind of file that shows up in the network traffic? Okay. Is there any evidence that connects USB drive to the network traces? Okay, so that USB drive is also your clue. Is there any kind of evidence that USB was connected? Okay. What type of evidence, what other things can you find? Okay. Then for number 3, so part 2 is 60 points. That's a huge chunk. So I want you to be able to address these questions. Part 3, examine the image that determine what happened to the computer hard drive and the USB. So you have to file carve a little bit here. Remember, we talked about allocated space, unallocated space. Autopsy is really good for this. OS forensic is really good for this. You've seen autopsy being used. There are tons of other tools that you can use, right? So 50 points. So in part 3, we are going to answer these 3 questions. What happened to the hard drive of the computer, right? You should be able to pull that from the DD, which is the image file that I gave. Where is it now? Okay. What happened to the USB drive? We did a little bit of lab with the USB drive. So from the image, you should be able to see how the USB was mounted. Okay. What is recoverable from the DD image for the USB drive? Okay. And so when you did the cloud lab, they introduced you to OS forensic. So you can also use that. Okay. Do you have to use a virtual machine to scan? It depends. If you're using Kali, yeah, use a virtual machine. If you're using a Windows tool, if you want to install it on your system and run it so it's fast, that's fine too. Or you can run a virtual machine. So once you have 1, 2, and 3, put it all together. I want you to create a report, right? To include, you need to list the tools that you use. Okay. Sometimes multiple. I recommend using multiple tools for the same thing. If you have time, so if you work with someone, one person use one tool, one person use another tool, compare the result to see if it's the same. If somebody have more result, go back and look at your tools, see what's lacking, right? And then include that in the reports. We talked about the integrity and how to check. Okay. Then also establish the timeline. We talked about the timeline of your evidence analysis from the requirements from tasks 1, 2, and 3. This is going to be 50 points. I'll try to give you, I thought I uploaded the templates on the actual assignment before, but I'll look again. Okay. Then part 2, after you finish all of this, you are going to evaluate yourself and your team member if you do work with one. I recommend that you work with someone, but in the case if you just don't want to work with anyone, just keep in mind it is a lot of work. Okay. So you are going to fill out a Google form. I do read it. So at the end, after you submit, I read through every single review. And then I like for you to either put it on GitHub or a Google site. I'm not going to require just one. So if you already have a GitHub repository, add a folder, make it public so I could see. This is important, okay? When you submit, make sure that your link works because it drives me insane when after the semester and I'm trying to look at somebody's repo and it's not working, right? It gives me 404 and I have to go and email you and say, make sure that your stuff is public. Same thing with Google site. Making a Google site doesn't make it public. So make sure that you edit it. So I'm going to show you the example, right? It gives you the steps on how to do this. And if you have a Google account or Google Drive, you can make a Google site. So I'm going to show you mine. And I did put some tutorial on the page for you. So this is one of my students that did it and he shared it with me. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. And this is for assembly. So it's going to look a little different. It doesn't have to be really fancy. He puts in a link for his code, right? If you have a GitHub and a Google site, sometimes they also put in like an image. So this is, some flow charts, some code information. So he did like a grade calculator program, right? So he output some of the screenshot and then you can add in the link. And on the right of Google, as you can see, right, you can add in text box. It's like PowerPoint. It's so easy. You can add image, you can link it to your drive, but make sure that whatever, so if you put stuff on your drive, make a folder and make that folder shareable to other things, right? So organize it as a directory. You can embed code. And then any style that you want, you can change it, format it this way. And then once you're done, you just publish it. Okay, you publish it with the change, you can go back and change, and then you can share the link. You can add people, so your teammates, you can add them. Okay, so that way they can add the content. Let me see if I have one on this profile. I did do one for the grant that I'm working on. Yeah. So I make multiple things. So treat it like a website, right? So I have one, and then you can add pages to it to make it look nice. So all you have to do is go here, or you can do insert pages, right? Insert, and then you can go down, you can add the pages. So I would have like picture page, and then, you can add the pages to your project this way. And once you're done, you can add this to your resume, or if you have a LinkedIn portfolio, I highly recommend using an e-portfolio because this is how people find you. And based on some of the employers' feedback, they said that, if I have like 2 matching candidates that graduate from the same class, that have the same set of skills, same about close GPA, good grades, everything. And they said their projects make a difference whether to hire or not. So you can stand out from the next candidate this way. So you can add in your projects. And then if you use GitHub, let me go to GitHub. Some of you use this already. So with GitHub, you just make an account. I think I forgot my password. It's been a while. Maybe not. I don't remember.
It showed a login. Same.
Yeah, so in GitHub, you can just create a repo. Let's talk about that real quick. Sorry. So I put some tutorial on the next pages for you. Okay. So on this one, when you submit the part 1, okay, what I want is I want you to be able to submit. I should be more clear with this. So I'm going to use this rubric to grade, right? If you submit the report, and then if you put together a document and answer these questions, and you can add the pictures, like screenshot the pictures where you find it onto one, that's fine. Okay. Some team in the past, they submitted like individual pictures. That's just a lot of upload. In my opinion, like uploading 9 pictures, I already know what those pictures are. So what you want is you just put it into one document. You can have one document including the report. That's ideal. Okay, so I'll be more clear on the submission part when I edit this tonight. Okay, so I'll put down how you submit. So when I go through, I would use this rubric. So if you want to know what I'm grading you on, you can follow this rubric. Okay, then for the next part, there's some tutorial like how to make a GitHub. If you use like some of these, they're a little bit more advanced and it could be difficult. But you know, if you use the information that's given by GitHub, that's also useful. So how to create a repo and so on. So I don't need you to make a branch, but it's useful when you're working in teams. And then pull requests is a way that you can see who modifies what, right? Like, so if I work with 2 other people in the class, if they started editing the files or code or whatever, I would be able to generate a report that shows who did that, who did which version. Because in a programming environment, a lot of times one person work on one version of the code, and then, you know, eventually you would be able to merge and bring it back to the main branch. So to share. So pull requests, it shows you how you can use that, how to create forks. The one big thing that I normally look for is the README file. So when you look at the link, okay, it walks you through on how to create a README, and it requires a little bit of HTML programming. But all else, put your name, you know, your repo date that you created, like, you know, for my programming class, I make them put the version number. But put the author's name, the date that you create your project, some general information on what your project is about. And if there is some type of tool, put the instruction on how to use the tool. It drives me crazy when I looked at the README file and it doesn't even have a name of the student on there. It just says final project, CIS, blah, right? And then I would put in the comment that you should put these things. So go through, and then it shows you on how to, you know, to use. And this is what the template would look like. Okay. A good README have these things. Okay. So it's embarrassing to show employer your repo if it's not like right. Okay. So I want to make sure I teach you the right content to go into your GitHub repo or your Google site. So that way you can have a good portfolio. Any questions? No questions? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so for the second part, we fill out the form. You can just submit a screenshot of but a link would be better. Okay, I want to see your link. So when you click submit, so I'm a student. When you click start assignment like this, now if you upload the file, right? If you choose to upload the file, upload your file, like the screenshot of your Google site, your Google evaluation, and then a link on that document for me to look get your GitHub or your Google site. Make sure things are public, right? If you choose to use this tab, from what my student tell me is that they can't do both. But I thought that I can. So you can upload a file and then click this tab and then put in the URL. But a lot of the students are telling me that they can only do one or the other. So if you need to choose, do the file upload. That allows you to put in the link and your screenshot, whatever that you need for the first part, okay? But I did enable these things for you. If you can also share it with me through the link, and so on. So it's pretty easy. Oh, Canvas, sorry, it's just a little laggy right now. Okay, so what is this gonna wait? You can check out your syllabus, but I'm gonna tell you right now. And on your grade at the top, it shows you the percentage breakdown for, I already set the categorization for all my grades, right? There should not be any surprise at the end of the semester. And, you know, if you did well on the final and then you realize, oh, I didn't pass the class, it should not be any surprise, right? I have a cutoff date where I don't accept any more late work. And so going into the final and the project, you should know where you stand and then what would be the grade. A lot of the times, the students ask me, like, where do my extra credit go? 99% of the time, it goes into your final exam or your project, right? Last semester, a lot of the times it went into the final exam because the student focused on the project and then they, you know, for some reason they didn't do well in the final. So I put it in some of the grade for that, and it never exceeds 10%. So usually it's about 7% pickup on your grade, okay? So your extra credit right now doesn't weigh anything. I manually change for everybody. Everybody is a little different. Your in-class assignment and participation, including the time that you come to class and do the work, that's 20%. These included all of these assignment breakdown. I need to fix some of the order in these. But your lab activities, that's 20%, right? Your homework, there's a couple. I will consider the final review. I'll think about it. Okay, so I might not even have it weighted, but in the past, that's also 15%. I will go over this in class. The quizzes, there are only 2. So after this one, we'll focus on the final. That's 10%. So your project is 15%. Okay, so all else, I'm going to tell you this, all else, if for some reason you're like, oh, I got like 4 other classes I have to worry about, and I can only do some of this, okay? Do some of it and turn it in. So like at least do the self-evaluation in your e-portfolio that's linked to your repo that could hold your project. At least do that, okay? Do not leave it not, because what's going to happen is I plug the zeros in and then the A becomes a C. And then, you know, if you didn't do well in the final, it becomes a C, period. Okay, so let's say if a person doesn't take the final exam and not turn in the course project, lose 30% in the class. So that is an automatically C. And then if you miss a few labs and assignment and quiz, that becomes a non-passing grade. And I hate to not pass people because of those things. So just get some of those things done. At least some partial grade is better than nothing. And the final exam, make sure that we do that. But I do send out reminder, and that's 20% of your grade. Okay, so with the missed project and the final, that's 35%. At the university at Cal State San Bernardino, 50% final, 40% project, and 10% assignments. Okay, so you can kill yourself doing assignment if you don't pass the final or you do your project, you're done, right? UCR is about the same. Okay, any questions? So not too bad. If you have questions, right, you're welcome to come in here and do the project. I cannot give you the answer, but I can give you some pointers on, you know, maybe like pointing out some tools that you can use if you're having challenges. So make sure that you decide whether you want to work on it. And I suggest work on it a little bit every week. Okay, do not wait until the end and then having to like study for the final and other things. All right. Let's stop share. Let's end my recording.